Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me again this evening. An interesting question came up last time when I was putting it out there what you wanted me to cover, and someone had asked about reconnecting with others. Reconnecting, hold on, make myself a little bit taller. There we go. Now, don't look so short. An interesting question, anyway, about reconnecting with other people after having been in a long-term relationship or environment, something like that, where there would have been a lot of isolation. I thought that's an interesting topic because something I often talk about is, the antidote to toxic people are decent people. But if you've been exposed to long-term abuse and neglect and things like that, you might have found yourself isolated. You might have found yourself not even able to maybe contact your family without there being some kind of argument. There was a problem with all of your friends, things like that. So there would have been a lot of grief. You would have maybe found yourself isolated, maybe losing contact, not messaging people as often, giving excuses before you go out, or so that you can't go out, rather. Narcissistic people tend to try to make you dependent on them. Okay, they want to be the center of your universe, the center of your world. They want all of your time and energy. And depending on where they are, I suppose, how they are, their own experiences and so on. Narcissistic people struggle with this thought of you having other people in your life, other interests and things like that, because if you're thinking about something that you like doing, or you're thinking about a friend, even someone from work or whatever, as far as they're concerned, you're not paying attention to them, and that can feel like an act of betrayal. So a lot of people find themselves being isolated. There's also a lot of gaslighting. There's a lot of manipulation, a lot of different tactics, the devaluation of you, your thoughts, your ideas, the evaluation of the people around you, your interests and things like that. And that can erode over a period of time. That erodes a person's sense of themselves, a sense of even trusting themselves if everything is being continually criticized, but also a lack of trust in others. They might find it hard to trust other people. The person they were with was constantly criticizing them, rejecting them, hurting them, and so on, while at the same time probably telling them that that's what other people are going to do. So they're left with a lot of difficulties, a lot of problems, a lot of self-trust issues, and a lot of self-doubt. Also struggling maybe trust other people. The relationship and that dynamic with that person can distort your reality, leaves people questioning themselves. There's a lot of uncertainty, okay? Coming out of that, it can leave people finding it hard, as I say, to trust themselves, but to even trust other people and their intentions. It can lead them to be very guarded. There can be hesitation in opening up to people, even to reach out to people that they used to know, friends, family, things like that, either for fear of being rejected because maybe they cut off contact, maybe they withdrew, or the fear of being manipulated again if they were to try to form new relationships. There can be a lot of blame as well, self-blame. They might blame themselves, feeling as if they've done something wrong by losing contact with someone. People can feel, for want of a better term, they can feel maybe defective, they can feel broken, they can feel a lot of shame for the situation they were in. They can struggle with social anxiety, and this can make social interactions quite tricky for them. They might feel unsafe again, they're not really trusting themselves. So, going back to the idea of the relationship, why people get to that point. Remember, they have been isolated from any of their kind of support networks. And over a period of time, those relationships with whether they're friends, their family, whatever, they started to fade. Okay. It was made very difficult for them to have any kind of interest, any kind of friendship within that relationship. So, say, coming out of that, they can be very guarded. They might feel very guarded. There's that fear of being manipulated again. There's that fear they might have done something wrong. And this can make it difficult for them to initiate contact. Or even if they're just having a conversation, it could be difficult for them to maybe have a conversation with someone, to try to reconnect with someone. and not feel as if they're undermining their own efforts. They might fear that they're sounding negative. They might fear that, again, that they've done something wrong. Um, there can be that sense of emptiness as well, and that sense of helplessness, I often think. And it's that what can cause that is the whole destabilizing nature of the relationship. Okay. So there, even coming out of that, there is still that sense of feeling destabilized. There's that loss of trust in themselves. What can happen sometimes in order to try to maybe form new relationships, sometimes the nature of that relationship might lead to things like people pleasing behaviors or fawn response. I think I talked about a few live streams ago. Um, they're prioritizing other people's needs, other people's feelings in order to avoid conflict. Whereas, really, whenever we're forming relationships and things like that, there are going to be differences. It doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be conflict. There might be disagreement, but it doesn't have to be aggressive or anything like that. But there can be the fear of that. So it can lead to people pleasing behaviors. It's usually coming from, again, that long term environment or relationship or situation where there was always that fear of abandonment, silent treatment, little minor rejections, criticisms, things like that. And again, coming out of that, that's become ingrained in someone. So there's that fear of abandonment and rejection, that fear of judgment. And that's another one of the reasons why we can find it difficult to either rebuild an old connection, an old ties, or trying to form new ones. Healthy interactions with people can sometimes feel unfamiliar. Again, there could be that question. Someone might just be being genuine, being nice, being friendly. But the narcissistic person was like that as well when you first met them. So you might be wondering, what are they up to? What is it they want? So again, that leads us to become quite guarded. What it can also lead to, long-term narcissistic abuse and neglect and so on, we can find our nervous system being dysregulated, okay? Um, we could feel something and we'll call it anxiety. For instance, we might be really looking forward to something. Something could be on the horizon. It's looking really good. I'd love to go to that. It sounds amazing. But there's another part of us which is afraid of what's going to go wrong. And sometimes when we're feeling it physically, and I thought this was interesting when I read about it, that sometimes the physical reactions, the physical symptoms to excitement and anxiety are almost pretty much the same. You couldn't get a cigarette paper between them. So sometimes we might be feeling very excited about something and we start to call it anxiety. Okay. Um, Sometimes we will feel a lot of distress. We won't quite be able to know why. Well, we do know why, but we can't quite put our finger on it. We might even be questioning ourselves, is there something wrong with me for feeling this? Because again, that person you were with would have criticized you for having feelings. They didn't want you to be happy about something. It would have, kicked the chair out from under you just so that you wouldn't be happy. But they didn't want to hear about your negativity either. So you're trying to operate inside this little tight sort of comfort zone. Because no matter what you did, there was always going to be some kind of criticism, some kind of attack, some kind of insult or whatever. There was also, I think I talked about this last time as well, there's the trauma bond. There are intense highs, there are intense lows. And this can have people, I think I talked about last time, sometimes we ruminate over past interactions. It's almost like an obsession we have, trying to make sense of things that really don't make sense. This can lead us to feeling lonely and sometimes unable to relate to others who we think don't necessarily understand our experience. Now, there are people out there who might not understand your experience, but there are other people who will. And sometimes, again, we find it difficult to discern the difference. Sometimes, going back to what I was saying a moment ago, if we are trying to tell our story, we sometimes fear as if we sound like the crazy one. We sometimes fear as if we're just being too negative. Sometimes if we might fear that If we were to talk about a specific incident, other people might be, they might look at you and say, come on, wise up. Maybe they just had a bad day, or it doesn't sound that bad, because that's just the one isolated incident. What they don't understand is maybe this was happening regularly, all day, every day. We're upset because they said no to something. And someone might be telling us we need to get over ourselves. But what they don't realize is that person said no to absolutely everything. We got absolutely nothing. We always had to give, we got nothing back. So there can be that fear as well. And again, that can lead to the dysregulated emotions and so on. And even those that don't fully grasp the abuse, they might dismiss it. They might even side with that narcissistic person. They might say, I often think, and I keep meaning to do this, the worst things you could ever say to someone who's experienced narcissistic abuse. There's this list of things. And sometimes you get people and they'll say things like, well, they're not like that around me. Or maybe they were just having a bad day. Or, it takes two to tango. All of those things are so incredibly devaluing. And sometimes people don't know they're doing it. They don't necessarily mean any harm, but they don't understand the impact that has on someone who just had their whole sense of reality rewritten. Okay. Was continually rejected, was continually hurt, was continually lied to, continually cheated on, all the rest of it. Because they didn't get to see that, doesn't seem to mean that much to them. And it can feel as if they're siding with the narcissist. And actually, I would argue in some ways they're actually enabling them. They're enabling that narcissist to continue doing whatever they're doing. So sometimes there can be the fear of that. They're not going to be believed. They're just going to be dismissed. They will be devalued. So any attempt at reconnection with someone, the fear is it might be futile. And because they were so used to having to hide their pain as much as their joy in the relationship, they're continuing to do it afterwards. So there can be a lot of different reasons why we struggle to reconnect with others or even to form new connections. But as I said, I thought it was an interesting question because something I often say is the antidote is decent people. That doesn't necessarily mean it's easy. And I think that question highlighted that it isn't actually easy. But, as I often say, difficult is not the same as impossible. Now, this is the thing about our recovery. It's a gradual thing. Everybody's journey is going to be different. It's going to be different kinds of support. There's going to be different options, different choices, things like that. Everybody's individual. They all have their own unique experiences and so on. But it is possible, and I think getting support, professional support, speaking to a therapist, support groups, things like that, are really good places to start. And I often say it begins with intent, begins with incentive, and it means, sometimes it means, I'm always careful when I say this, but sometimes it means taking risks, not crazy, mad, reckless risks, okay? Just little, small, measured ones. But above all, I think it means focusing on the self-healing, okay? Some of the things that you might want to focus on in your healing, your self-healing, whatever direction you want to take, therapy, support groups, things like that, reading up on books, things, whatever the information is, whatever it is you think would find helpful. Start to build a bit of trust in yourself and get your identity back. Start listening to your intuition. Start listening to your gut feeling, okay? It doesn't mean that you're a mind reader. It doesn't mean you're clairvoyant. It doesn't mean it's your spider sense tingling or whatever. But it is worth listening to your intuition. When you're doing that, you're tapping into your sense of empathy as well. So tap into your intuition and validate your own feelings. If you're feeling anxious about something, even if you feel that anxiety is dysregulated and it's maybe out of proportion to whatever it is you're facing, still acknowledge it, okay? The more we try to suppress things in the short term, whenever we start to suppress things, in the short term, that can help us in short bursts to get through whatever it is we need to get through. In the long term, that's not so helpful. The more we suppress things, they're going to have to come out somehow. Things like anger, anxiety, and so on, whenever they get turned inwards, become internalized, they tend to come out as things like low mood, depression, and so on. So validate your own feelings. Learn to identify them. Journaling can help. You can write down what it is you're feeling. Again, let's say anxiety. You feel anxious about something, but take that word anxiety and start to break it down a bit. Go a bit further. You're feeling uncertain. You're feeling a lack of control. You're feeling helpless, whatever it happens to be. Even angry. You feel angry about something. Well, you feel you've been treated unfairly. You feel devalued. You feel disrespected. You feel, you see this sense of unfairness, whatever it happens to be. What you're doing is you're starting to identify and recognize your own feelings, and you're starting to validate them. Okay. You can also practice little small boundary setting decisions. Okay. Little low risk things, I like to say, because this can recalibrate your sense of self. And the more you practice this, even on your own, even with your journal, whatever it is, even if you're looking at yourself in the bathroom mirror, whatever it happens to be, if it's in your support group, if it's with your therapist, whatever it is, this can help make it easier whenever you start to engage with other people authentically and honestly, rather from a place of fear and a place of avoidance. Okay. Again, it's something that might take a little bit of time, bit of support. And like all things, you might get it wrong a few times. That's perfectly okay. We learn from what goes wrong every bit as much as what goes right, okay? If you are feeling loneliness, again, we do yearn, part of us always yearns for some kind of connection. Feeling that sense of loneliness can be the motivation sometimes and the intent in order to try to form either reconnections or new connections. And the journaling can help with that, because you can be looking at things that worked, things that didn't work, things you might like to do differently, things you might like to do better, or things that you could build on. Okay. It can also help you with things like your self-affirmations. It can help you to recommit to finding a way forward or a way through something. The more you reflect on your journal and you look at older entries and you look at where you are today, you can actually see growth. You might find yourself doing little things that you found difficult even just a month ago or this time last year or whatever. Other things that you might find helpful to regulate the nervous system and things like that. There are different exercises out there. There's mindfulness exercises, breathing exercises, different kinds of exercise, physical exercise, going to the gym, going for a walk, whatever it is. Some people find it helpful to maybe join a group. And that could be maybe, for instance, if it was the gym, you don't just go to the gym, but you maybe join a class in the gym. Or it could be maybe a hiking group, or it could be a reading group. It could be anything. When you're doing things like that, again, you're getting out there, you're forming a new social network, you're doing a little piece at a time. It begins by just being polite, being nice, being friendly, all the things that we do naturally, okay? But these things can help appreciate. When you're doing that, it can help you to appreciate that whenever we are forming relationships, they tend to be a slow burn. It takes us a while to get to know people as much as it takes them a while to get to know us. And good relationships tend to be built on things like consistency and mutual respect, rather than trying to jump in and be overly friendly and rushing to be accepted and all the rest of it, or the opposite, trying to stay on the outside and waiting until you're invited in. One moment, I need a drink. talking for a living is not something I would ever be good at. Anyway, where did I get to? Yeah, I'm talking about the slow burn of getting to know people a little piece at a time, letting them get to know you a little piece at a time. We don't need to share everything about ourselves. And we don't necessarily expect them to share everything about themselves either. We just get to know each other. I mentioned a moment ago about the boundaries and setting them in little small ways. Over a period of time, you get to know what your boundaries are. And I put a video out recently about recognizing your boundaries and things. If you want to have a look at that, if you think that would be interesting, and how do you assert them. But when you get a sense of what your boundaries are, you can get a sense of what you're prepared to be flexible over, but also what is an absolute deal breaker? What is a red line? Okay. The more you get to know yourself, the more you'll start to recognize these things. But in those groups, or even old friends that you're trying to reconnect with, you can do these things in, like, let me see, low level activities, low risk things. And what you'll find is, if they are people that you're familiar with, you might find it a little bit easier to get back into that. If you say, they want you to go somewhere for a coffee or whatever, you don't particularly want to go there, you might find that easier to say no. You're not necessarily saying no to avoid going. You're saying no because maybe you have something else on that day. Maybe it doesn't suit you. Maybe you won't be free that morning, whatever. There could be a lot of different reasons. But you're not saying no, and you're not saying no forever. And you're paying attention to their reactions, their responses. Okay. And let me see, I'm just thinking about that as well. And the low pressure activities, that could be such as maybe the book club, or the new hobby, or the new class, or whatever it is. Those kind of activities can help you expand your network. Okay. Even doing a bit of voluntary work or something, whatever it happens to be. And again, it's the slow burn that you're looking for, rather than the immediate being welcomed in and everybody's best friends. Something else that can help as well is, I just mentioned the voluntary work. Sometimes helping others is a good way for us to. There's something in us, I think, that feels good whenever we help someone. Now, it's not necessarily that we're just doing what we're told. Remember, in the narcissistic relationship, we were expected maybe to do everything for that person, even to manage their triggers, even to manage their anxieties, even to manage their social interactions or whatever. But when you do something, and I think this is an important thing to remember, when you do something voluntarily, and when you do it of your own accord. You do it because it's your idea. You do it because you want to do it. That's different. Okay, you're not feeling as if you're being manipulated. You're not feeling as if you're being controlled. You don't feel as if you're doing it because you have this sense of duty. You're doing it because you want to, and that's the big difference. So that could be something like, someone's moving house, maybe you just want to go around, help them or whatever, help them put stuff into boxes or whatever. They're cutting their grass, their garden or something. You just want to go around and give them a hand. It could be something as simple as that. It could be voluntary work. You might want to volunteer, do a bit of charity work or something, whatever it is. But one way or another, you do these things, you do them of your own will, you do them of your own accord. You're doing them because you want to, you're doing them with intent. That's the big difference. And that can help you get a sense of yourself back, your own self-empowerment, your own autonomy, and so on. You're doing it because you want to, not because you've been emotionally blackmailed into it. Also, as I say, if you're in a group or a club or something like that, it can foster those new bonds, the new bonds that you're trying to make, and it kind of does it organically. Nothing's being forced. You're in a hiking group or whatever. Yeah, of course, people are going to be chatting away. They'll ask where you're from, and did you watch last night's movie or whatever it is. just random small talk. And it's not let's start that again. Not necessarily a bad thing. But over time, as you're starting to connect with people, what you might find is it's not that the past goes away, but it's having less of an impact on the here and now. Because this is the thing. The number of things that have us feeling disconnected, it's not just the fact that someone might isolate us from people. Things like trauma disconnect us. Things like addictions disconnect us. And one of the ways to help heal is to actually become connected, to feel a part of something, to feel as if we belong, to feel that whether that's part of a relationship, part of a group, part of a community, whatever it is, to feel part of something. Because I think it's interesting. I never really thought about it until a while ago that if you look at some of those AA groups, the Alcoholics Anonymous and Gamblers Anonymous and all those groups, the anonymous groups, they talk about the 12 steps. And there's something that they seem to preach a lot, and that seems to be about connection. You know, making up to people that you might have hurt during your addiction, becoming a part of something bigger. They talk about the fellowship of the group and all that sort of thing. Now, I don't know if that's by accident or design, but there is something in feeling a part of something, feeling connected to something. It can help. It can help heal our traumas and so on. Even someone who has been deeply traumatized, one of the things that can lead to is alienation, when they withdraw, isolate themselves and so on. And finding different ways to connect with others in nice, safe ways is a good way to help release that trauma, help to heal the different things that are hurting them. And I think I talked as well about post-traumatic growth. Some of the things that can happen as we are healing can help with our ability to be able to attract healthier people. It enhances our empathy, things like that. So there is a lot could be going on whenever it comes to reconnecting with people. When it comes to reconnecting with people, remember I said about what the difficulties could be. Sometimes we might feel a bit embarrassed. Sometimes we might feel like it's too late. Maybe they have moved on. They wouldn't care. Sometimes we might feel as if they wouldn't want to know or whatever. Well, the thing is, everybody's different. We won't know unless we try. That's all I can say. And that's what I've said about taking the little tiny measured risks. What you might find is if it's someone who did care about you, they're probably going to be glad to hear from you. Regardless of what's happened, they're probably going to be very glad to hear from you, glad that you're in one piece and you're well and you do want to reconnect. And some relationships, you might find there are some relationships at one time it might have been very close. And it's almost like we pick up where we left off. You know, sometimes they're the best kind. But then there's other ones, okay, maybe it does take a little bit of fostering, but that's perfectly okay. Whether it was your family, you probably find it welcome you back. Whether it was friends that you were very close with, yeah, they might be glad to hear from you. We really don't know unless we try. But even if maybe they have moved on or they're doing whatever it is, that's perfectly okay. They're not necessarily rejecting you. But what we're doing is we're leaving that door open, because we don't have to be best friends that are going to see each other every other day. Could be a couple of times a year we'll meet up for a coffee or whatever it is. Could be occasional text messages, phone calls, whatever it is. There's still going to be some kind of contact. It does take, as I say, maybe taking a little bit of a risk, does take a little bit of courage. But what do we lose what do we lose by trying? Okay. The other thing I would say is, the last thing I'll say on this is that the healing and the connecting, or even the reconnecting, isn't necessarily a linear thing. Any journey of recovery isn't necessarily linear. Sometimes we'll take a step back in order to be able to move forward. Sometimes we'll have to take a step to the side. Sometimes we might even have to change direction. It doesn't really matter. The important thing is It's still a journey, okay? We're still moving forward. And patience is the key. To always say it's a journey. It's not a mad, crazy sprint to a finish line, okay? And what you might find is, and you'll find this even before that toxic relationship, whatever, after it, during it, there are going to be people who are going to come and go in your life, just like you're going to come and go in their lives. And that's perfectly okay. You're going to have friends. You might have friends for a couple of weeks. You might have friends for a couple of years. You might have friends for a couple of months. You might have friends for the rest of your days. It doesn't matter. You could be friendly with someone you're working with. But once that person leaves or you leave, you get different jobs, you might never see each other again. That's not necessarily a bad thing, okay? So remember that when we're connecting, we are going to connect. We're going to have friends, different kinds of friends, friends we will talk about different things with, friends we will not necessarily talk about things with, to different degrees, to different levels. And that's perfectly okay. So I hope you find that helpful. I hope you find that interesting. What I can't do is I give you a definitive list of what to do, because everyone's different and so on. But it is important to remember that the narcissistic abuse often leaves us feeling disconnected, not just from other people, but from ourselves as well, which is why a lot of the healing is just focusing on yourself and doing things for yourself. If it is going to be about dating, by the way, if you want to move on in dating, that's entirely up to you. Thing is, though, just like those friendships, you take a bit of time to get to know each other. Let them get to know you every bit as much as you want to get to know them. I don't know, maybe it's the world we live in today. Everything seems to be, I don't know, everybody's at something at warp speed. No, take a bit of time. Okay. So I'm going to go back to the beginning and I'm going to have a look for any questions. Remember, if anybody has questions, a big question mark or something like that will make it make it a lot easier for me to find. So, Dollars Mum, thank you for this, Darren. You're very welcome, Dollars Mum. Ali says this will be interesting. Well, I hope you found it interesting. Hello, Basaya. Hello, Solo Traveler and Shirley. Shirley says it's a lonely, isolating experience, especially as the scapegoat. Yeah, the nature of the scapegoat is you are responsible for all their pain and misery. Okay, you're to blame for everything in the whole world. Anything you do or have for yourself is maybe an act of betrayal or it's selfishness or something. So yeah, it can be quite isolating. But as I say, coming out of that, it's about recognizing the impact it had and doing a little bit of self-healing, doing all the stuff you need to do, the stuff that I was mentioning earlier. But it's also being patient with yourself and being compassionate with yourself. I often say, when I say about people being compassionate with themselves, do you ever notice we would never talk to other people the way we talk to ourselves, the way we criticize ourselves, we give ourselves a lot of grief? If you were to treat yourself as if you're someone you really care about, if you struggle to do that, then treat yourself as if you're someone that you're responsible for. Okay? One way or the other. You do things in your own best interest. And just pay attention over that period of time. And it might feel uncomfortable at first, but the more we do these things, the more you'll find your comfort zone starting to widen, the more those new experiences will start to rewire some of the old pathways that were programmed into you by the narcissistic malware, or whatever the term is. So where do we get to? Hello, Adam. Hello, Wes. Let me see. Ellie says, I trusted absolutely no one eventually and had a difficult way to go on learning self-trust. And that's the thing about learning self-trust, Ellie. I might be wrong. You're welcome to disagree with this. The thing about trusting ourselves is to recognize that sometimes we make mistakes and we get it wrong. That does not mean that there's something bad about us. Okay, it's perfectly okay. But yeah, we do have to trust things like our instincts and our gut feelings and things like that. We trust our decisions. Something you can do to help with your decision making is to start in even just small little ways. And that could be something like, today I'm having the soup at lunchtime. Okay, whatever it is you've decided to do. Now, you have every right to change your mind if you want to see something else that looks nicer. But no, I'm going to have the soup today, and you stick to that. Okay, because you might have found yourself in a situation with someone where you'd have said, "Yeah, I think I'll have the soup today," and they start talking you out of it. No, the soup's bad. It's evil. It was made by horrible people that sacrifice baby kittens and stuff. Whatever it is, everything you ever did was undermined. So it's very hard to trust yourself. It's almost like you're asking for their approval for even something as simple as what you'd like for lunch. So you make something small like that and you commit to it. Now, as I say, if you see something else, you see a sandwich or whatever, and that happens to look nicer, yeah, you have every right to change your mind. But if you make some kind of commitment to yourself, you're going to have the soup, you're going to have the coffee, you're going to have whatever it is, stick to it. There are little ways to start trusting yourself again. Hello on my way. Oh, you're in Turkey, is it, Adam? Get some sleep. Yes, get to bed. Early start tomorrow. Absolutely. You can watch me on the recording. Where do we get to? Okay, James is saying 2 years plus since I got away from a narcissist brother who I worked with 6 years. Still guarded and isolated. Because, well, yeah, it's like I said, that can stay with us for a long time. It's almost like it's programmed into us. Back in the old days, used to call it conditioning. We get conditioned in certain ways. But it doesn't mean we can't break the programming. It doesn't mean we can't become reconditioned, if you will. It doesn't. And it does take us doing little things for ourselves. And quoted him, I think I quote him every live stream. Jay Reid puts it in a wonderful way. You start to live in defiance. Okay, when you start to do those little things and you start to take those little small steps, yeah, you'll start to see new pathways opening up. The old program is going to start to become rewritten. Okay, where do we get to? Baby steps is a helpful strategy. It is indeed. Yeah, little step at a time. I always say if you're afraid of the water, don't jump into the middle of the Atlantic just to see what it's going to be like, because that ain't going to end well for you. No, you take little small pieces at a time, even if that begins with just a trip to the seaside, sit in your car and watch the water. Little small things at a time, absolutely. But you pay attention. This is the thing. When we feel really uncomfortable about something, when something maybe brings up a distress in us, the more we try to avoid these things, the very things that we do to try and avoid them can often be the things that either make them worse or just keep it going. Okay. So when we face the things that make us uncomfortable, when we face the things that bring up a level of distress in us, but we do it in small, little, measured ways. We do it with intent. We do it of our own accord. We do it of our own free will. When we start to do that, what you'll find is your comfort zone starts to widen. You start to become a bit more confident. You start to become a bit more resilient. Your tolerance for distress starts to increase, and you start to become a bit more courageous. Now, it doesn't matter if that takes you an afternoon or whether that takes you a year or two, but you do that consistently and you do it again of your own free will. You pay attention, you start to notice the differences. Okay, so where do we go? Journaling helps with anxiety. Yeah, journaling can help with a lot of different things. It's good. I'm glad you find it helpful. Where do we get to? Any questions? Rushing is a red flag for me, says Ali. Yeah, it can be. I don't know what it is. It's just the 21st century. Everybody wants something immediately. Um, or is it, yeah, that just some people are far too pushy? Hello, Missy. Hi, Missy. Nice to see you here. Ellie says, I'm a fine public speaker. Thank you. Happy November. Yes. Let me see. Mean people have made kind people more valuable. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. Mean people have made kind people much more valuable. Yeah, yeah, I would agree. Fricadella says, helping is helpful when it isn't out of duty. Yeah, we don't feel coerced into it. We don't feel as if we have to do it. Now, there are some things we do have a responsibility for. Maybe we do have some sense of obligation, but not every single thing. When we choose to do something, remember, we're doing it of our own accord. And there is something very, very different in that. Lily's Mima, if I've pronounced that right, I hope I have. Fairly new here. Glad I finally made it on time for a live stream. Well, glad to have you here. So let me get to. One gal said, I had a lot of shame to deal with after my narc. London gal, I think shame can be a part of it. I think shame is a difficult thing. Shame can become very toxic in the sense that shame can prevent us from maybe reaching out to someone. But shame can also be a very useful thing in the sense that it can help us regulate our behavior. We're not going to do anything silly that's going to make us, experience shame. We're not going to do anything outrageous or whatever. I don't know your situation, and I don't want to sound like I'm being judgmental because I don't know your situation and I don't know what was going on, but I don't think there is any shame in having been on the wrong end of a nasty person. Okay. I don't think there's any shame in having been conned or lied to. It's not to say there aren't things we don't have responsibility for, but there is no shame in having been on the wrong end of a narcissist. You will meet very few people who haven't, to different degrees, different kinds of narcissistic people, but you'll meet very few people who haven't. Not everybody ends up in a long-term relationship, working place, cult, or whatever, or family of origin. But one way or another, they walk among us and we're going to meet them. And if you've been on the wrong end of one, it doesn't necessarily mean that you did anything bad or wrong. Now, again, I don't know your situation, so I don't want to sound like I'm being too judgmental, and I don't know what was going on. But a lot of the time, the things we did or the things we said, I think we might have done it from a good place. I think we might have done it because we thought it would have made things better. Who knows? But anyway, but as I say, shame can be a very difficult thing. It's not a nice emotion. It's not a nice feeling. It can be toxic if it holds us back, if it suppresses things in us. But it also can be a positive thing. Helps us to regulate our behavior. We're not going to do anything bad or anything wrong or anything outrageous or anything. So it really depends on the kind of shame, and it depends on how it's affecting us, I guess. Richard is asking, which part of Scotland am I from? From the part across the channel, okay, in that northern part of Ireland, known as Northern Ireland, the Ulster part of Scotland. Oh, you're only joking. You know I'm from Northern Ireland. Okay, I've just seen the second one. Okay. Blessings, dear Darren. Well, to you too as well. So where did we get to? Oh, just had a massive jump, so let's get back. BSN reactionary abuse. Don't feel bad about them being addicted to agitation. I never liked the term reactive abuse or reactionary abuse. Never liked that term. It just never sat comfortably with me. But I heard Mark Vicente talking about it recently. He said the same thing. He doesn't like the term either, and he called it a reaction to abuse. rather than reactive abuse. And I think that's a far better term. It is a reaction to abuse. It's a far, far better term for it. Oh, local heroes. Would I consider a video dedicated to limerence and narcissists? I did a live stream on limerence. You will find it, but I also did a video as well on limerence. The difference between that and love, but in the live stream I think I talked about the limerence and the narcissism. So there are two things there. You will find them. Not quite sure, but if you go onto my channel you'll find them. I don't even know what playlists they'll be in, but you will find them somewhere. I hope you find them interesting. Where do we get to? Oh, it's just jumped again. Blokes have a hard time making friends at the best of times. Any suggestions after 12 years of emotional abuse for meeting some new guy friends? Well, Nath, that's a good question. And not knowing anything about you, I guess I would ask, what are you into? If you're into sport, why not join a gym? Why not see if there's any teams out there? Want somebody play five-a-side football, whatever it is. You into reading? Why not join a book club? Whatever it is, try to find some kind of group. But it's like I said, the stuff I was talking about earlier would apply to men as well as women, okay? In little small steps, you might want to take part in something, get to know people a little piece at a time. What you might find in groups, there's like-minded people. Somebody likes books, someone likes maybe games, someone likes sports, someone likes model making, someone likes whatever it happens to be. If you have some kind of a hobby, some kind of interest, either you're really into it or you would really like to learn more about it, see if there's any groups in your areas, in the area that you live. Just go along, see how it goes. But yeah, little small steps at a time, and get to know people a little piece at a time. Trying to get advice from me, and I don't do anything. It's just me and Freud, and just go for danders about the place. I live in the middle of nowhere. I'm probably the least likely person to talk to people about how to go out and make friends. I live in the middle of nowhere. Find something. If there's something you're interested in, as I say, if there's something you're interested in, see if there are any groups that talk about that kind of thing or do that kind of thing or whatever. See if you can go along, see if you can join, or even if there's something you want to learn, a new skill, a new hobby, whatever it is, and you want to do a course in something, then enroll in something and just get to know the people around you, that little piece at a time. Okay. And as I say, it does mean taking risks, but little, small, tiny risks, little low-level risks. You're not going to lose a lot if it doesn't work out for you. Okay, let me see. Where do we go? Where do you get to? Tolerance levels are taken advantage of in bad relationships. Tolerance levels are taken advantage of, but I would go the other way as well. Tolerance levels are exploited because there are some things that are unacceptable. And once you, pardon me, once you get pushed so far, then your reaction and your lack of tolerance is what's exploited and what's pointed at. That's what I say. It's like having to operate within a tight little zone. There are some things you have to tolerate, and there's things that you're not allowed to not tolerate. And just like you're not allowed to show things that you're good at and things that you enjoy, but you're not allowed to talk about the things that are hurting you or upsetting you either. So yeah, it's very, very, try to compress you into this tight little operating sphere, and it's not good for people. It's not good for anyone. Where do we get to? Which part of Scotland? Cute response. Where do we get to? Every time I go to answer, this has jumped. So where we get back to? Let me see. MJ, sure, we're trying to explain to people with no psychology background or literacy can also feel like talking to a wall. Well, it depends on what you're talking about, I guess. I mean, it can be. That's the thing. Even when people start using terms like narcissism or whatever, a lot of times people will know what we're talking about because we know most people know what the term means by now these days. I think if you just talk about the behavior, if you feel comfortable enough and it's safe enough to do it, by the way, you don't want to get into trouble. But when you talk about the behavior, the long-term behavior, that's maybe a bit different rather than labeling something, labeling someone as whatever. Because that's the thing, even when we start to use terms, sometimes we forget we can't actually diagnose people. I mean, I can't diagnose people. But we could talk about things like narcissistic type behavior, things like that. So on my way, I need to go. See you next week. See you next week on my way. On my way is on his way. Bazia one, hi, I would like to ask how long can a person get stuck in isolation after narcissistic abuse, especially if you have CPTSD and have been diagnosed with avoidant personality disorder. I really don't know how long anyone could get stuck in isolation. There can be different factors, things such as complex trauma. There could be other things going on. You mentioned avoidant personality. I can't give you an idea of how long something's going to be. I can't even tell you what your path to recovery is going to look like because, again, it's going to be different for everyone. But consistency is, as I say, with intent and consistency. Whenever we persist at doing the things we think we need to do in order to get ourselves out of that difficult situation. For some people, it's going to be a short journey. For some people, it might be a long journey. For some people, it might be an ongoing journey. But what you're really looking for are the small little changes, because sometimes we miss those. And the small little changes could be you've suddenly become friendly with someone at work, or you could be friendly with the person that serves you coffee in the coffee shop. You know, they see you there every morning or every other day, and they recognize you and so on. You pay attention to the little small things that we often overlook. Because if we're not paying attention to the little small changes, what we're often doing is we're looking at why we haven't changed yet, why we haven't got quite to where we want to be yet. So we pay attention to the little small things. And that's where, let's say, journaling can help, because we could look back at entries from even a few months ago or even a year ago or whatever, and we might see a difference. We might see similarities. Some things still crop up, but they might not have the same impact that they had previously. So where do we get to? Okay. As they get older, toxic behaviors get worse if they don't work on themselves. Yeah, I would say they get worse if they never face consequences as well. That's the thing. Nobody likes consequences, negative ones anyway. Nobody likes consequences, but everybody understands them. Even the most toxic people in the world. Even they understand them. Where we get to... I think I'm coming towards the end. Yeah. Okay. Fricadella saying, after betrayal, I became irritable, quit job, even though I can't afford it. Licking wounds in solitude. It's getting a little better. Knowledge about cluster B helps me a lot. Well, it's good to know that it is getting better for you. That's the important thing. Again, this thing about a betrayal, I often say, you're never betrayed by your enemies. You ever notice that? You're never betrayed by your enemies. You're only betrayed by the people that you trust. And that's why it hurts so much. Where did I get to? I think I have come almost pretty much then. I think I've covered everybody's questions. So then everyone's just having a good old chat with each other, which is a good thing to see, by the way. I do like people chatting away and connecting with each other. I like how people do encourage and support each other. It's nice to see. It's very warming feeling. Okay, so reconnecting with people from your past, trying to connect with new people isn't always an easy thing to do, but it's not an impossible thing to do. Sometimes it requires us to be looking at the stuff that's going on with us as well. It could be learning to trust ourselves, trust our intuition, trust our judgment, things like that, to recognize what it is we're feeling and why we might be struggling, why we might be trying to avoid certain things. Quite often, and I know I say this time and time again, I said it earlier, I said almost every live stream, counseling is a good place to start. Okay, speaking to a counselor can help you to understand yourself better, as well as finding things to help overcome some of our, if you will, maybe our self-limiting beliefs. Maybe appraise ourselves a bit more honestly. Have a bit of faith in ourselves, but also look at ways of coping with difficulties. There's a lot could be going on. Really depends on what you go to counselling for, but counselling is a good place to start. When you go to counselling, it's because we believe something's not working and something needs to change. Something needs to be different. We would like something to be better. There could be something hurting us, something holding us back. Okay, so again, everyone's journey is going to be different, but I do hope you find this helpful. I will be back again next Sunday. I will put it out there again, any topics people want me to cover. I just thought this was an interesting one because I always talk about, meet up with decent people, form healthy relationships, but I keep forgetting. I never thought, I do know this, but I never thought of talking about the difficulties we might have with that. Because especially if we've been in a long-term situation, we were continually being told that we're bad, we're wrong, we're flawed, we're whatever, and no one likes us and no one cares, and those people that you think are your friends are horrible. Yeah, there can be so much going on with this. So yes, I will put it out again towards the end of the week. Any topics people want me to cover. Failing that, just go ahead and put any suggestions you have either in the wee posts on the community post thing that I don't even know what the hell it's called. I hope you do. That's on my channel or underneath even one of the videos, and I will get to it eventually. I will find it. But as always, everybody, have a good week. Look after yourselves. Take care. And if I don't see you before it, well, I will have a video out tomorrow. But I'll see you next week. Bye now.